Welcome to Movie Oubliette, the film review podcast for movies that most people have mercifully forgotten.
I'm Dan.
And I'm Conrad, and in each episode, we drag a forsaken film out of the oubliette.
Discuss it and judge it to decide whether it should be set free
or whether it should be thrown back and consigned to oblivion forever. Others tend to forget. Come with us and open up the movie oubliette.
Childhood nostalgia! Greetings, listeners. You're listening to Movie Oubliette, a continental conglomerating podcast with me, Dan, obsessed with dips in Melbourne, Australia.
And me, Conrad, obsessed with ABBA in Cambridge, UK.
Yes. In this podcast, we nod knowingly over genre films, horror, sci-fi, and fantasy, because nothing gets us going more than big pharma, 90s virtual reality, and of course, data storage. Conrad, hello.
Hello, Dan. So what's this about dips?
Well, you know, going through the vegan phase at the moment, and you know, trying to find alternatives to dairy, and a lot of dips have dairy in it. But yeah, it seems that you can pretty much put anything in a blender and it becomes a dip. So you're making a lot of dips with butter beans and lentils and yeah, anything. You just put it in a blender and blitz it up.
How about avocado? Where do you stand on avocado?
Yeah, I love avocado. Avocado's been really cheap in Australia for the last 2-3 years. I don't know why. There's no off season. It's always been like $1.50, maybe $2 for an avocado for the last 2.5 years. It's amazing.
Marvelous. I do love a bit of mashed avocado.
Delicious.
Honestly, I'm such a cliche driving my electric car and vegan avocado toast. It's bad.
Yes, and also going to ABBA.
Yes, also going to ABBA. I ventured out for the very first time with my brother to go and see a concert in London. And of course it was the virtual ABBA concert in their purpose-built stadium in the old Olympic Village. And it is spectacular, absolutely spectacular.
Yeah, I mean, you described it, and I can't even fathom it. It just sounds like a science fiction film.
It really does, yeah. I mean, just thousands of lights and these enormous screens, and it completely convinces you that the four of them are on stage in front of you, just because it creates this illusion of this continuous environment of lights. So all the lights in the stadium are matched by lights sort of in and around and behind them, and as the lights go past them, they actually light them up, and it's really quite phenomenal. And the live band that's playing the music are on point. It sounds just like the recordings, but genuinely alive and full of improvisation and fun as well. And they are great musicians. And yeah, just bottom line, being in a room with 3,000 people jumping up and down to Gimme, Gimme, Gimme a Man After Midnight while lasers fire around the room and ABBA jumps about on stage in Tron outfits is a great way to spend your evening.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we're in the future, Conrad.
We are. The possibilities are endless, because I guess they can just change the lineup whenever they want to, because I imagine they've done more songs than that. They have them in the bag, so...
I mean, imagine if they just keep writing songs and then they release them, you know, after they're gone, and they continue to have concerts.
They could have prepared, you know, they could have prepared a statement for their 100th anniversary or something. You don't know.
Wow.
It's quite freaky. And quite relevant to what we'll be talking about today. So
yes.
There we go.
Yeah, yes. That's to come. But before that, mailbag, Conrad, have our listeners been speaking to us?
They have. And I will kick off with a really lovely message that we got through Facebook from a guy called Steve, who said, "Hi, Dan and Conrad. Just a quick note to say how much I love your podcast. I've discovered so many gems as a result of tuning in. You both bring so much humour and knowledge to the show, and the quality of the production itself is second to none. The jingles and theme are top-notch. I'm always humming the theme, much to my wife's annoyance. Keep up the great work. I'm just sorry that I'm getting close to being up to date. I'm on Nightbreed, so it means I'll have to wait longer in between movie gems. All the best, Steve.
Oh.
Isn't that just lovely?
Oh, that is very, very kind words.
It is. Thank you so much, Steve. I just love the idea of somebody sort of binging us all the way from the beginning and finally catching up. That's amazing.
That is very impressive. I mean, more than 100 episodes. That wow. I'm surprised you're not sick of our voices.
I know, I would be. But there we are. So welcome aboard, Steve. It's great to hear from you.
Yes.
On ill-advised director cameos in relation to M. Night Shyamalan's appearance in Lady in the Water, Bent Ed suggested that Quentin Tarantino in Django Unchained was probably not a good idea.
Right.
So, I don't know if you've seen that movie.
Yes, I have. Yes. I don't know.
Yeah.
Quentin, I mean, yeah. He likes his feet and he likes to cameo. You know.
Yeah.
He can have his cake and eat it too.
I suppose so. I didn't know whether tonally he fit into that movie now that Bent Ed mentions it, but there we go. Talking about representations of critics in movies, Kevin from Planet X said, your discussion of the critic character in Lady in the Water reminded me of the Siskel and Ebert analogues in Roland Emmerich's Godzilla. The response from the real-life critics to the lack of a grisly demise for their on-screen counterparts was actually disappointment.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yeah, they wanted to be eaten, apparently. Which, fair enough.
Okay.
If you've got a sense of humour about yourself. I suppose in that one it wasn't, criticising their work at the same time. I don't know. So, there we go. On Shocker, Back to Oz says, even if you put it to the oubliette, you still made me want to see it.
Yeah. I love when that happens, though. Like, I love, even if a movie sounds awful, you kind of want to experience why. Or maybe it doesn't sound awful, you know.
Yeah, so maybe we're failing in our central mission of curating films for people and advising them against pitfalls. Because, you know, if it's a bit of a car crash, you want to check it out, don't you? It's just human nature.
Yeah, exactly. and if you've had a very detailed discussion about how it doesn't work, you would like to see why, like how did it not work? Like what went wrong, you know?
Yeah, exactly. On your weird DVD cover, Luis Saavedra says, what's the most outrageous international interpretation of a movie title? For example, Home Alone is, and I'm going to not say this right, Mi Pobre Angelito, or My Poor Angel in Latin America.
Right. That's no resemblance to the original title.
No, and I don't think he's a poor angel either. He's a little shitbag.
Yeah.
But there we go. When we ask people to name their favourite film produced by a live film, so like Shocker, Eddie Coulter says, Prince of Darkness is by far my favourite. Such a great, creepy flick. I would agree with that.
Yeah. We've covered it on the pod. It was a very interesting sort of left of center movie.
Yeah, strange, moody, dark, cerebral horror movie. Yeah, really enjoyed that one. And finally, of course, we heard from Serge of Cold Crash Pictures.
Talented.
Who said, Shocker is plagued with tonal inconsistencies, unexplained rules of the world, and weird character motivations and behaviours. I think it works better as a comedy than a horror, but really only half of it, and I'm not sure it knows that anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yep, summed it up perfectly, as always.
Yeah, if they'd gone full tilt into the comedy, like Brain Dead, Peter Jackson's movie, then it could have been a sort of very unique, funny movie, but not quite.
Yeah, not quite. No, or Intruder, which also featured Sam Raimi, but no.
Nope.
Didn't work. Didn't work. But what did work was receiving all of your messages. We loved hearing from you, so please keep sending them in.
Yes.
So, what are we doing today, Dan?
Well, I guess people will probably know from the opening title that this is a childhood nostalgia episode, but I'll just go grab it. Oh, there's some data gloves I guess I should put on and this weird visor thing.
Oh, futuristic.
I have to launch myself into the internet. A few codes here and there. Oh, here it is. Got it.
Halt, sinners!
Wow.
Okay, I'm back.
Oh, that's a relief.
And I have with me today, it is, yes, a childhood nostalgia film. So from my childhood as a angsty teenager or sort of young teen or tween, I guess, when this came out. From 1995, Johnny Mnemonic.
Ooh, yes. Keanu Reeves.
Yes, I know. So his first film that we're going to be discussing on the podcast, directed by Robert Longo, who I don't know any other films that he's directed. Screenplay by William Gibson, the sort of godfather of cyberpunk. And it stars Keanu Reeves, Dina Meyer, Takeshi Kitano, Dennis Akiyama, Ice-T, Dolph Lundgren, Henry Rollins, and Udo Kier.
Only in the 90s could that lineup happen.
Yes, exactly.
And what happens?
Well, it is the year 2021. So just last year, a plague grips the world. NAS.
Does it now?
Yes, nerve attenuation syndrome. The corporation rules while the populace wallows in poverty and cyberpunk implants. The internet is a dangerous place full of hackers and data pirates, and the only way to transport data is downloaded onto the brains of human couriers, mnemonics. Enter our main character, Johnny. Just Johnny. He is tasked with delivering an unfathomable amount of data. Was it 320 gigabytes? Something like that. But he is double-crossed and hunted by the Yakuza and a sadistic, murderous preacher. However, he is helped by Jane and Spider and J-Bone, you know, your normal futuristic cyberpunk names, as well as the bridge-dwelling rebellion, the Lo-Teks. Will the data in Johnny's brain save the world, or does the fate of human existence rest on a dolphin? Let's find out.
Oh, God. I cannot wait.
Yes. So we are back to talk about William Gibson's Johnny Mnemonic. I did not even realize it was a William Gibson screenplay. And I was actually commenting about the film as I was watching it with my wife. Like, this reminds me of Neuromancer, that book by William Gibson. There's like implants and it's quite a diverse cast, similar to Neuromancer. And the credits rolled and it's a William Gibson. Like, so... Although apparently he wasn't very happy about it. But Conrad, have you seen this movie before?
I did, yes. I saw it on video back in 1996, I guess.
Yes.
And completely forgot about it. If you'd held a gun to my head, I would not have been able to tell you a single thing about it until I rewatched it for this episode.
Yeah.
And I'm not familiar with the works of William Gibson either. I'm aware of him. I know who he is. I knew that his name kept cropping up in the X-Files as a writer of guest episodes every now and again.
Sure.
I know he's this grandfather of cyberpunk and hates the fact that he's known for inventing the word cyberspace and so on and so forth.
Right, yeah.
But not something that I've gone back to. But you watched this a lot as a teenager.
Well, yes. Well, I had watched this a lot. You know, you go to friends' places and they'll be like, let's watch Johnny Mnemonic. And Keanu Reeves was all the rage in the 90s, you know, after the Bill and Ted movies.
Oh, yeah.
And Chain Reaction was quite a popular film in the 90s as well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's where he was a nuclear physicist.
Yes, very believable. So I have seen this movie quite a few times, but I don't remember it at all. Like, I didn't remember the whole data storage courier thing, plot point. For some reason, I recall it having time travel, which it doesn't.
No.
There's no time travel in this movie whatsoever. You know, it's set in this future where, the internet is not safe and they have to physically transport data in these chips, these wet-wired chips installed into humans.
Yes.
And they can double their storage capacity with a doubler. I don't exactly know how that works. Just like an extra extender or something. But I do like the premise and the fact that he had to wipe a whole bunch of childhood memories to make room for the data.
Yes.
And I do like this kind of world where it's very uncanny how similar it is to our current state of the world with a plague. It doesn't seem to be as deadly, though. I don't know. Some people seem to be dying, but it's not really shown that much apart from that one scene.
Yeah.
And I kind of forgot about it as well. I forgot there was a plague.
Yeah, there's like a big field hospital that Henry Rollins is working in, isn't there? That's sort of like the one in Highlander 2 where everybody's dying from radiation from the sun. So they all end up in these Nightingale hospitals with everybody out on stretchers and volunteer doctors doing their best. But yet it's not really delved into in any great detail. And I think that's similar for the main character too, because he's set up with a very familiar hero's journey. He's an individual who's traded a part of his humanity for a lucrative job and creature comforts, and then discovers that he holds the key to saving humanity. I mean, it's a couple of things. First of all, it's very much like Inception.
Sure.
You've got a guy who ends up having to do some sort of one last futuristic heist in order to get back his humanity or his connection to his childhood or whatever. And of course, the shadow of the Matrix looms large over this movie.
Yeah, so this is 1995, so this is a good 4 years before the Matrix. And the visual aesthetic of the film is very similar to the Matrix. Like, the corporate elite are in power, and then the normal working class are being puppeteered by the corporation. Very kind of similar look to the Matrix, and kind of a gritty sort of underworld where the working class live, with the Lo-Teks in this movie.
Yeah, which is more ethnically diverse as well.
Yes, yeah. It did remind me a lot of other sort of Armageddon type movies like Mad Max. Also, it reminded me quite a lot of The Fifth Element as well.
Yeah.
There's one scene where they're in a club and there's dance music, but it's opera over it.
Yeah.
Very similar to The Fifth Element.
Yeah, it's sort of opera techno metal mashup with the funky drummer loop on it, which is like the most oversampled drum loop in existence. But what got me about that is the opera singer looked utterly, utterly bored. Like she would rather be dead than performing.
Right.
It is very similar. You're quite right.
So I don't know, did this influence The Fifth Element? Because Fifth Element didn't come out for another 2 or 3 years. So I don't know, there are moments in this film that did feel like I really liked this world, but production-wise, it felt very low budget.
Yes.
Like a lot lower than it should have been. Like a lot lower than The Matrix, for starters. Like The Matrix looks quite squish and polished, whereas this, it feels like everything's a set. And everyone's an actor. And there are some like composite scenes with the helicopters. I'm like, they don't look like they're in the scene at all. Like really dodgy green screen effects on certain scenes as well. It was a bit lacking production-wise.
It is, yeah. So it's a $26 million budget, and apparently William Gibson and Robert Longo, who has not directed another movie since.
Yeah.
Primarily, he's an artist. He's a visual artist, a sculptor.
Right.
Not actually a film director. I think he's done a couple of music videos for bands like REM, which were conceptual art pieces. And I think the belief was that he could direct a movie based on William Gibson's work, and the two of them were really excited about collaborating together. They started shopping this around, and nobody would take them seriously because they were asking for sort of 1.5 million to make this black and white art movie, essentially. Yes. And nobody would pay any attention to them until they started asking for 30 million. And then all of a sudden they had a green light.
Right.
And they wound up with a 30 million budget. And Keanu Reeves, right at the point when Speed was released, and he suddenly went from Bill and Ted guy who was okay in Dracula but not really very good, and then all of a sudden he's an action hero.
Yeah.
The studio thought, wow, we've got a hit on our hands here. This is going to be great. And it wasn't.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, we should really address the acting. Keanu Reeves is very hit and miss in this movie.
Oh, boy. Yeah.
I mean, he is a bit hit and miss in general. He tends to play the one character very well, like the Neo character, the lone wolf, no emotions, a lot of hushed tones, a lot of one-liners, often revenge involved. John Wick. That kind of character works really well with him. I mean, he's in a lot of movies. I didn't realize how many movies he's been in, looking at his filmography, and like very good movies as well. Point Break, Speed, which came out the year before Johnny Mnemonic, which is insane because like polar opposite movies. Like Speed is a very, very watertight movie in my opinion.
Oh yeah.
And then he kind of like did The Matrix, obviously, and A Scanner Darkly, which I think is a really incredible movie. And then sort of odd good movies like Constantine I quite liked. And then it wasn't until John Wick came out in 2014 that he kind of had a huge revival, and he's kind of been in sort of supporting and cameo roles since. He is in a movie called Knock Knock in 2015. I think it's an Eli Roth movie. It's horrendous. It's so bad. Really, really, really bad.
I remember you telling me about this. Isn't it a bit similar to Hard Candy, the David Slade movie?
Yeah, similar premise. There's two girls that arrive at his door, but yeah, it's really terrible acting on all parts. Like no one is good. So yeah, he's very hit and miss. In this movie, he's a lot of miss.
Yeah.
I mean, his opening scene is, did they do other takes?
I know.
Like
I know that's unfair though, because they've got him staring directly at the camera, sort of doing a one-on-one conversation with his sort of video phone TV screen, talking to his crime boss that gives him jobs.
Ralphie.
And the full force of the Keanu performing ability straight down the barrel of the lens of the camera towards the audience. And from the word go, I thought, oh, we are in for a rough ride here.
Yeah.
I mean, topped off with the fact that the movie kicks off with that title crawl.
Yes.
That's barely comprehensible.
I mean, yeah. There's a lot of information to try to interpret in that title crawl. And then you're just thrust into this world. Watching it now, like I don't think I understood this movie as a kid. It's quite dense.
Yeah.
I mean, it's silly, but it is quite dense. There's a lot going on. There's a plague. There are data couriers. There's the corporation, and there's the Yakuza that are working for the corporation. And then there's, was it Pharmacom? Some big pharmaceutical company. And then there are little Lo-Teks. And then there are implants into people. There's a lot in this world. Like, I do really like this futuristic landscape. But yeah, it is quite hard to sort of get into it because you don't know what's going on for a bit.
No, you don't. I mean, it's based on very rich source material. It's based on a short story from William Gibson. It strays quite significantly from it, though. The original is pretty much just the scene where Johnny Mnemonic meets Ruffy in the bar and Jane intervenes to rescue him because he's got this information in his head already and he's trying to get Ruffy to download it and he won't, and there's a fight and Jane helps him escape, and then she says, I know somebody else who can get the information out of your head, and it turns out that it's a heroin-addicted cybernetic dolphin, which, you know, it's obvious, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
I mean, that would have been the first thing I would have thought of.
Yeah, what a twist.
So that's pretty much the material they had, and then they have to stretch this out over the course of a whole plot. So you have the hero's journey where it turns out that he has the information in his brain that will save the world, which is a cure for this plague, which didn't exist in the short story.
Yeah, right.
And the twist, which is that glad you're sitting down, Dan. Corporations are evil.
Of course.
And they would rather profit from other people's misery than actually release this cure and treat them for the condition that they're all suffering and dying from.
Yeah, yeah.
Which I read an economic criticism of that to say that actually it's insane because they'd make much more money off the cure than they would off of just letting people die. But anyway.
Yeah.
That aside. So it's a rich, dense, interesting world from William Gibson, as of course it would be, being who he is, with this obvious commercial Hollywood hero's journey story with some tropes from the late 80s, 90s about corporations thrown in for good measure.
I did read that it does draw heavily from a later novel, Virtual Light.
Okay.
But he has come out and stated that the screenplay, they changed it a lot in this movie. And even though he is credited as the screenwriter, they changed it a lot. And he wasn't happy with the international cut of the movie. Apparently the Japanese cut is better and more sort of true to his original screenplay. I don't know where you would find that though.
It is available here actually. It was just released recently in a box set that contains the Japanese version as well as the international cut. But I didn't manage to get hold of it, unfortunately. Yeah.
It'd be interesting to watch. I mean, talking about this world of the movie, I mean, William Gibson in reading Neuromancer, I have to admit, I did not finish it. So it kind of got real crazy. It got to a point where they were in space and there were Rastafarians in space. And I just his world building is dense, very similar to the world building in this movie. So it is a lot to sort of consume, but he does tend to have a lot of diversity in his characters. Like he's always going to different countries and a lot of different ethnicities and minorities, which is really interesting. Like you don't see that much in sci-fi films, and even in this movie, the Yakuza are involved, but there are a lot of like very important Asian characters in this movie that you wouldn't see normally.
Yeah, which fits into the cyberpunk aesthetic, which especially in the wake of the explosion of interest in anime after Akira at the beginning of the decade. I think this vision of the future, which is that the Asian culture has taken over the world. I mean, this started on screen cinematically, probably with Blade Runner. I think most people think of that as being the first film adaptation of what was emerging from writers like William Gibson. And also trying to move away from this very staid, sterile Stanley Kubrick, lots of white people in a NASA sterile space adventure, and instead twisting it into something that's sort of a combination of high tech and low life, I think is the way that William Gibson put it. And also having this rock and roll influence. He says, when I started to write science fiction, I knew I was working in a genre deeply deprived of hipness. I went looking for ways to import as much rock and roll aesthetic into science fiction as possible. So he talks about in Steely Dan's lyrics, David Bowie, Velvet Underground, and, quote, punk was the last viable bohemia. If you think about it, there hasn't really been a social movement as disruptive and original as punk, perhaps. So, yeah, hence cyberpunk. So a very different vision of science fiction and quite dystopian from the perspective, I guess, of white people who just wanted the nice, clean, futuristic environments entirely populated by wealthy, comfortable white people. So, yeah, it's interesting socially in terms of how it represents the world. And what a shift it was for the genre.
Yeah, I think this movie is quite pivotal in that sort of direction of sci-fi. I mean, like The Matrix and The Fifth Element, that sort of more grimy, but yeah, punk aesthetic. I guess we should talk about some of the other characters and actors in this movie. Takeshi Kitano is in this movie. I didn't even realize it was him until the credits rolled. He is a very renowned director, He's directed some incredible movies: The Outrage, The Blind Swordsman, Zatoichi, Sonatine, and Violent Cop. Really, really great Japanese movies. And you've also got, because it's the 90s, you've also got Ice-T.
Of course.
And Henry Rollins representing their musical genres, hip-hop and punk. Henry Rollins used to be the frontman of Black Flag. And Dolph Lundgren, who was much more popular in the 80s. I didn't really even know about Dolph Lundgren until I watched The Expendables. Like, I hadn't really seen many of his movies.
Not even Masters of the Universe.
Okay, I have seen that. I've seen Masters of the Universe and Universal Soldier. I think it's the other Dolph Lundgren movie I've seen. And that's it. I didn't realize he was in The Punisher, I didn't know there was an 80s Punisher movie.
Yeah.
Wow, I'd love to watch that. And he was in Rocky 4.
Yeah.
And I haven't seen any of the Rocky movies. So
no, me neither. I know. I can just hear all the Americans listening to us just gasping in horror.
Yes.
We have never seen a Rocky movie between us. So bad.
Yeah.
They're sort of iconic, I guess, but no, not seen them. Dolph Lundgren is an interesting one in this one because I think he's deliberately trying to show his acting chops a little bit more by playing a very, very strange character.
Oh, yes.
This assassin who self-styles himself as a preacher, sort of an evangelistic cult leader, but seems to be pretty much a lone wolf who's cybernetically enhanced up the wazoo and can kick everyone's ass.
Yeah.
Quite a formidable presence in the movie. It's ridiculous, but it's memorable.
I kind of liked it. Like, it is very ridiculous. It is very kind of, I guess, Guillermo del Toro almost, like, or Tim Burton. I don't know. Just like a villain that is just insane.
Yeah.
Like that scene where he just stands in the middle of the road while they're driving and he just shouts, "Sinners!" and gets mowed down. It's amazing.
And he grabs Dina Meyer's character and shouts, "Jesus time."
Yeah, so this is apparently Dina Meyer's first feature film that wasn't a TV movie. I don't really know her, but she is from Starship Troopers and the Saw movies. Apparently, I've only seen a couple of them. And Dragonheart. Do you know Dina Meyer's?
No, not really, no. I mean, she's wonderful in this. She's not given an awful lot to do, but she makes the most of it, I think.
Yes, she does.
She plays a new character that's been invented for the movie because the character in the original short story, Molly Millions, had already been licensed for a film adaptation separately.
Oh, right.
Because, I don't know, she's quite a popular heroine.
Right.
Yeah, so they couldn't use it. So they had to come up with a new bodyguard character who's cybernetically enhanced, and they also give her this nerve syndrome. So she sort of can be a damsel in distress and kick ass, which is quite
I mean, I liked it. I didn't mind it. It was refreshing having a damsel being able to take care of herself.
Yeah.
And at least try to fight the street preacher, Dolph Lundgren. But yeah, the romance was a bit like, what? Where did this come from? Like, I didn't get that during the film. It was a bit like, oh, this is just Hollywood being Hollywood all over again.
Yeah.
It seemed a bit out of place.
It's completely unnecessary, and I don't think that played a role in the original short story.
Right.
Now, I like the equality of it. So Johnny saves Jane from Dolph Lundgren's preacher character, and Jane saves Johnny with Jones the dolphin.
Yeah.
As sort of a deus ex machina.
Yeah. It's great to see Henry Rollins in another film. He always just cameos in the strangest movies. He was in Feast, Jack Frost in 1998 movie, Lost Highway, and Heat, apparently a very tiny role in Heat. And most recently I saw him in He Never Died, kind of a weird movie where he's like a fallen angel, but he's like I don't know. It's kind of a strange movie, but he's pretty good in that.
He's pretty good in this, actually. I thought, for somebody who's not primarily an actor, I thought he did pretty well. And Ice-T was good as well. I enjoyed his role. I kind of wish there was more of it. There wasn't much to him at the end of the day.
Yeah, I quite like Ice-T. I mean, he's in some horrendous movies. Leprechaun 5, In the Hood.
Oh, God.
A movie called Jacob Tutu Meets the Hooded Fang. And apparently he was also in a porno movie called Frankenpenis. in 1996.
Oh, lovely.
But his breakout role was the movies Breakin' and Breakin' 2, Electric Boogaloo.
Oh, yes.
And it's quite surprising to see him in those two movies, which don't really have a plot. It's just a lot of dancing for no reason.
Right.
I mean, there is a plot. I mean, I'm being a bit harsh, but yeah, they're quite ridiculous movies. But
I have never seen either.
yeah, I'm very, very, very 80s. But I mean, Ice-T is probably most famous for being in 495 episodes of Law and Order.
Oh, gosh.
SVU, which he is still currently a character in. He's been doing that since 2000, so 22 years in a TV show.
Oh, well, good on him. I mean, everybody needs a stable job.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, he's saddled with some very clumsy exposition.
Yeah.
I thought the Lo-Teks and the location of their headquarters would be quite secret, you know, that they wouldn't want people to know it. And yet he just immediately offers up to Johnny Mnemonic, I'm J-Bone. I run Heaven, the Lo-Tek headquarters, and points at the bridge where their headquarters are.
Yeah.
And then walks off. I thought, oh, shouldn't you keep that on the download? No? Okay, fine. It's just exposition. It's like when Shinji turns up at Takeshi Kitano's office. Or does he play Takahashi? Gosh, that's confusing. Yes, he turns up at his office and he suddenly comes out with, I didn't want to disturb you in your grief. It must be very difficult to lose an only child. Which, let's face it, is incredibly tactless. You would never say this to even a friend, much less a very, very powerful criminal boss who's just lost their child to nerve syndrome.
Yeah.
It's clearly sort of putting words in characters' mouths just so that they're pummeled at the audience, and that they didn't need to be, because you saw him watching videos of his child and you could tell that he was grief-stricken. So you knew what was going on, but no, someone has to come out and say it.
I don't know whether I knew.
Oh, really?
I don't know whether I knew.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think because it was so dense, like I kind of needed that exposition spouting, like to make it very, very clear. But yeah, because there's so much going on in this movie.
Yeah.
I will agree, though, it is very clumsy. The storytelling is very, very clumsy, coupled with the not so great effects and production value and not great acting at times.
Yeah.
It was challenging to watch, but I did find it was quite 80s for me. It didn't feel very 90s, like with the whole punk aesthetic and a lot of some of the makeup effects on the characters was very, very 80s.
Oh, yeah.
And I guess we should talk about the music. It's very 80s as well.
Yes, Brad Fiedel in the international version, although originally the score was written by Michael Danner, which apparently is still on the Japanese version. I've listened to an interview with Brad Fiedel, who's probably most famous for scoring The Terminator.
Yes.
An all-synthesizer score with a very well-known theme that's very clunky and metallic and electronic and repetitive and sort of monotonous and relentless. It was perfect for that movie.
Oh, it's iconic.
Hasn't really achieved a great deal of success elsewhere.
Sure.
But in this movie, he was drafted in at last minute, apparently, and given the task of clarifying things. Like in action scenes, he was told it's not obvious who is doing what or how the audience should feel about it. So we need, this is heroic, this is good, this person is bad. You've got to spell it out. And he talks about orchestral sessions, and yet it does not sound like an orchestral score to me at all.
Yeah, I mean, there are some moments where I think there were strings, but yeah, a lot of it's very 80s, a lot of synth, a lot of 80s programmed drums as well, like those 80s toms. It didn't seem very 90s at all. Like it felt like they were trying for something from 10 years ago.
And the soundtrack, what did you make of that in terms of the songs that were included?
Yeah, I didn't really recall the music during the film, but watching the credits, like it is very sort of early to mid 90s, like Stabbing Westward and Orbital, who were also in Hackers. Then Rollins Band, which is Henry Rollins' band. Of course, he's got to get a song in there, and Helmet, and also a song by Bono and The Edge, but not U2. It's credited Bono and The Edge. So
yeah, they did that on Mission Impossible as well, didn't they? They did a remix of the Mission Impossible theme for Brian De Palma's movie.
Right.
And they were Bono and The Edge. I don't know what happened to the rest of them. Not bothered.
Yeah,
I don't know.
just half of you two, just the you. So yeah, I don't know. Like it wasn't very like it didn't feel like a normal 90s movie that tried to sell the soundtrack. It wasn't very overt during the film. Like it felt more scored than having all of these like hit songs from the 90s start playing for no reason.
Now it's time for random trivia.
Okay, Dan, what wonderful piece of trivia did you find in the recesses of your neural implant today?
Yes, well, this piece of trivia is about one of the actors in the movie. I did not realize that Ice-T's real name is Tracy Lauren Marrow, which
Wow.
not much of a rapper name, so I can understand why he changed it.
No, well.
Tracy Lauren. I mean, Lauren is a middle name and Tracy is a first name, and Marrow.
Tracy is a male name. I'm not sure I've heard that very often.
No. I mean, I've never heard of Lauren as a male middle name either. So,
No. Wow.
Also, Henry Rollins' real name is Henry Lawrence Garfield. So not much of a punk name, so I can see why he changed it as well.
Yeah. Well, especially in the 90s, because stick-on Garfields were everywhere at the time.
Yes.
I don't think he'd be taken seriously with that.
No.
I had a fun piece of trivia too about the implant, oddly enough. Johnny's implant is disguised as a treatment for dyslexia in the movie.
Yes.
Which is a problem that Keanu suffers from in real life.
Oh, right.
As well as the director, Robert Longo.
Right.
Also suffers from dyslexia. And neither of them were very good as students because they had difficulty reading. So there you go.
Wow. That's very interesting.
And that's our trivia.
Yes.
I don't think the music did much to enhance the action either. I mean, the action scenes are poor. Robert Longo is a visual artist, not necessarily a action movie director,
Yeah.
I don't think. I mean, certainly hasn't done it since. I think a really good example of this is the scene where Johnny Mnemonic is in the hotel room getting his download at the start of his mission and they're interrupted by the Yakuza. I mean, there's an initial moment where the door is broken down by a laser whip, which is really exciting, cutting through the door, but it's immediately followed by a poorly lit slow motion shot of people standing up and looking around. You know, you compare that sort of 4 years later with how slow motion was used in a groundbreaking way in The Matrix to enhance beautiful images of physical prowess or glorious destruction, capturing these moments in what became known as bullet time. Whereas this movie's got this dimly lit slow-mo shot of people looking confused. For me, that encapsulated the difference. I know you shouldn't compare these two movies, but it's kind of inevitable.
Yeah. I didn't mind that scene. It did come across as quite clumsy, but it did remind me of like John Woo movies, action gunfighting movies from Chinese cinema.
Right, yeah, that's a good point.
Not as sort of beautiful, I guess, because I mean John Woo's just got doves flying everywhere. No doves in this movie. But there were a lot of shots in that scene where you don't really know who was shot or who was who or what was going on. Someone gets his hand sliced off, or Johnny throws someone through a shower door, but then he gets up later on. It is a bit confusing.
It is, yeah, and I think that was exactly what Brad Fiedel was asked to clear up in the international cut, where they were trying to turn it into something more commercial, more obvious, more clear, more exciting, that delivered on the action. I don't think the movie was intended to be that.
Yeah. It is interesting, though, knowing that Robert Longo was more of a visual artist because I didn't find it that visually beautiful either.
No.
I found some of the set design was like sort of the atmosphere and the sort of dirtiness of the film quite interesting to watch, but it didn't have the same sort of cinematic lighting of like Blade Runner or some of those 80s inspired more modern films like Drive or something like that, where they've got crazy colors or neon lighting. There wasn't really any of that.
No, there are some incredible sets. I mean, the Heavens set with all the televisions, I mean, that looks like something out of Terry Gilliam or 12 Monkeys. It's,
yes, that's right.
You know, it's very impressive sets, and William Gibson talks about walking onto the sets and being overwhelmed by seeing his worlds recreated in a live space.
Sure.
So yeah, some of the sets are impressive. The way they're shot and lit.
Yeah.
Not great, I didn't think.
Yeah.
Very underwhelming. And then visually, like Lawnmower Man, it's saddled with an early CGI rendered climax that's clunky, ugly, and relies on sort of abstract notions that have to be explained to you by Ice-T's character off screen. It reminded me of Lady in the Water because he was telling you like, oh, he's doubling himself. And then you see this version of him in the virtual world being destroyed by a quote unquote virus.
Yeah.
And then Ice-T's character says, don't worry, that's the double. And it's like, I invented something, a problem came along, the invented thing solved it, no tension. And this all happens in 3 seconds while you're looking at the ugliest primitive 1995 CGI that you've ever seen, created by Sony Imageworks. It drains all of the drama out of the finale. It's awful.
I felt that finale was bold, you know, relying solely on CGI for this huge finale scene that did not come across. I mean, it's the 90s, it's mid-90s, like that amount of CGI is insane for such a huge part of the film. Like I don't know why they relied on that amount of CGI. It is ugly, but it's not as ugly as Lawnmower Man. Like, they kind of had fun with it. And because of the cyberpunk aesthetic, they could kind of lean towards those crazy colors and, you know, it's a brand new world, the internet. Whereas Lawnmower Man felt very small and insular and it's just like one guy floating around.
Yeah, that's true. It does look, I mean, Sony Imageworks looks better than the company that did a couple of adverts that was hired for Lawnmower Man. It's dramatically, it still doesn't do a lot for me, though.
And especially when he goes into the internet to do very basic tasks as well. Like,
phone someone.
I'm making a phone call. But I need like these gloves and a visor and I need all these special things to make a phone call. So it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But it is the 90s. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's an advance on where we were with Lawnmower Man, where they thought, you know, VR is going to be everything and it's going to be this alternative world that people are going to live in whilst they're rocking about on a dentist chair. Whereas this clearly displays it as just a user interface. It's not a world that you're going to inhabit. It's just something you use to pass information and communicate. And he's putting on a visor and gloves in order to interact with it more efficiently, supposedly.
Sure.
Which points towards Tom Cruise in Spielberg's Minority Report a few years later, where he's just using his hands and just moving information around in front of him. That's something in the film's favor. But again, all of this comes from William Gibson, who was very good at thinking and projecting these things.
But I mean, I would like to ask the question, has there been a good movie that has depicted virtual reality in a pleasing way? Because it always comes across as a little bit shit, no matter the technology. Like, it always does.
There's that David Cronenberg movie, Existenz, where you just end up in a fish factory or something. It's like, this is really rubbish. I would not want to spend my weekends doing this, gutting fish or whatever.
Yeah, but in that movie, they film it. So it's not like a virtual world. It's not all CGI or anything. It's filmed as if it was real, but it's not real.
Yeah.
Whereas, I don't know. I think it's really hard. There's a movie called Gamer. I think it's got Gerard Butler in it.
Oh.
That's not great. The only movie that I can think of is that Ryan Reynolds movie that came out recently. What's that?
Free Guy.
that works.
Yeah.
But it's kind of video gamey, so they can have ridiculous stuff happening. So that's all right, I guess.
What did you think of Spielberg's Ready Player One?
I mean, that was just a big reference movie, wasn't it? It's like every 2 seconds, here's a reference
Yeah.
to some pop culture. Ha ha ha. Let's point and say, oh, I know what that means.
Yes.
I don't know. It was fine.
This is a meme movie. It's
yeah.
like, oh, look.
Yeah.
Member berries. I feel good.
Yeah.
It's my childhood again.
Yeah, pretty much. But yeah, I can't really think of another movie.
No, you're right. It hasn't been done very satisfactorily anywhere, but it's definitely not done satisfactorily here. It never really emotionally engages you. A combination of the acting and really being underwritten. I'm not really sure what Johnny Mnemonic is fighting for. There's this whole one last gig to get. Is he trying to get back his childhood memories or not? He doesn't seem to be particularly bothered at the end.
I think he just wants out of the courier game, I guess, the data storage transportation game.
Yeah. I do find it hilarious. I know it's an obvious joke, but the fact that Keanu Reeves can only store 320 gigabytes in his head just makes me laugh.
I mean,
it's like less than the USB stick I've got rattling around in the drawer somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, it's the 90s. You know, we had floppy disks that could only store like 3 megabytes. I mean, come on.
Yeah, it's very true. Yeah, so I don't really know what the main character wants. And seeing as the action was so bad, it never really engaged me just on a spectacle level. It was just sort of conceptually interesting with a cast that were variable, doing interesting things here and there. But yeah,
I don't know. I was invested in the world building from William Gibson. I like this world, and I would be keen to watch a sequel if they ever made a sequel.
Oh, God.
I think that would be interesting.
Well, I think it's unlikely. It was released on May 26th in 1995, debuted at 6th place behind Casper, Die Hard with a Vengeance, Braveheart, Crimson Tide, and Forget Paris. Oh, okay. And quickly slipped further down as more films released, like Bridges of Madison County. What a different landscape we had in the cinema then. And
not a Marvel movie in sight.
No, not a Marvel movie in sight. A real sort of historical epics, action, military things, rom-coms. It was actually knocked out of the chart by While You Were Sleeping, popping back into the top 10.
Right.
While it slipped out. It took $19 million worldwide, apparently, in its original release. So it bombed pretty badly. So your likelihood of a sequel is quite slim, I think.
Yeah. Well, I'm hoping for one.
Well, who knows? Keanu Reeves up for anything these days in terms of,
the Matrix,
belated Bill and Ted sequel. Let's do it.
Matrix sequel. Yes.
Oh,
yes.
gosh,
So,
that didn't go down well either, did it?
I still haven't seen it. Yeah.
I haven't seen it, but it did not go down well.
Who knows?
Johnny Mnemonic 2, Electric Boogaloo.
Coming to you live from the Movie Oubliette Theatre, it's the prestigious Mobley Awards.
Okay, it's the Movie Awards. It's where we present our favorite futuristic implant-enhancing parts of the film in a number of nerve-attenuating categories.
Best quote.
My favorite quote, it's a list of technology that Keanu rattles off. I always find it funny in sci-fi movies where they list all this like technology that doesn't exist, and it's all a bunch of silly words. So he says, this is before he goes into the internet to try to hack in and make the phone call. And he says to Jane, I need a Synologic 16, Sogo 7 data gloves, GPL stealth module, a Birdine intelligent translator, and a Thompson iPhone, which was surprising. But apparently it's not spelt letter I phone, it's spelt EYE phone. So not a precursor to that, the smartphone.
The smartphone that changed the entire phone market and rejuvenated Apple single-handedly. Yeah. There we go. My favourite quote comes from, I think, Keanu's iconic scene in this movie, which is where he stands on a hill and has a hissy fit about the fact that he's got to save the world when he really doesn't want to. And he says, quote, I want room service. I want the club sandwich. I want the cold Mexican beer. I want a $10,000 a night hooker. I want my shirts to be laundered like they do at the Imperial Hotel in Tokyo. It's a fabulous sort of screaming meltdown of just impetuous, entitled silliness when he really should be focusing on the bigger issues at hand.
Yeah,
and
I know.
I loved it.
I know. I would say that was my favorite scene. It was just like so. I mean, it's Keanu giving his all, really. It's a monologue. It goes on for ages. It's just him acting.
Yes.
Best hair or costume?
Hair or costume, I give this to Pretty, the character played by Tracy Tweed, who's one of Raffi's aging, supposedly, bodyguards, who has this amazing makeup that's running from her eyebrow line down to her ear and from the corner of her mouth up to her ear. And this has all this shading on it.
A lot of contouring.
Amazing, hair sprayed bouffant, almost like a helmet of sort of backcombed hair over her head. It's very 80s punk. She looks like
80s.
an artist called Toya Wilcox in the UK. But she really just inhabits it now she's in it. She goes completely punk and inhabits that character. It's great. I think she looks incredible.
Yeah.
So how about you?
Yes, hair and costume. I have to go with Johnny's hair. But again, it is very 80s. It's not 90s at all. It's got like a side part, but it's not 90s gelled, like spiky. It doesn't look like that. No. It's kind of like hairsprayed and dry, but it's got a very clear side part as well. Like it's almost like he's from like Street Fighter or something.
Yes, it's sort of shaved and chiseled into position. This side, it's more like a impenetrable wall that goes along. It's amazing. Yeah,
most 90s moment.
I was gonna go just for the obvious. The internet as the focal point of the movie. It was very reminiscent of hackers and the portrayal of the internet being this kind of city of digital spires and I don't know, like why did they decide that was what the internet looked like? I don't know.
Interestingly enough, that was my bid for sci-fi cliche, which is the internet is a busy cityscape of lights and towers and neon signs. See also hackers. It's inevitable, really is. For 90s, I had cyberpunk in Japan, the anime explosion following Akira in June 91, and you just had all of these dystopian future high-tech, low-life combinations, starting with Total Recall in 1990 from Paul Verhoeven, Demolition Man in 93, Strange Days also in 95, 12 Monkeys from Terry Gilliam in 95, The Fifth Element in 97, which you mentioned, and then, of course, the one that revolutionized action filmmaking, The Matrix in 1999, which signaled the way forward for the next decade.
Favorite scene?
Favorite scene, you've already mentioned it. It's the Johnny monologue. It's just Keanu Reeves at his best.
It's the small hill to die on scene, I call it. But immediately before that, there are some great moments too. Like the introduction to the scene is two guards in like a crane on this heaven bridge that their secret base is on. And you just come in the middle of their conversation and one of them says to the other, I told her, if she want to get with me, then I want to get with her. Screw the physical disability. You know what I'm saying? Because it's about the feeling, right? It's like, what the hell are we coming in on here? What is this conversation about?
Yeah.
But
it did
great.
It kind of reminded me of like a Quentin Tarantino movie or something. You know how he always introduces characters from out of nowhere that you have this extended scene with, and then they're just killed in the next scene, which happens in this movie as well.
It does, yeah. No, I loved it. So it started off with that, then they dropped a burning car on somebody.
It looks amazing.
And then Keanu Reeves had a meltdown on a hill. Yeah. So I just thought, this is great. I wish the whole movie was like this.
I know.
Most cliche moment.
I've already said my cliche internet as neon cityscape, so that's mine. How about you?
I mean, there's so many cliches in this movie, but again, you know, it's William Gibson, godfather of cyberpunk and sci-fi as we know it. But I'm going to pick a very sort of subtle cliche. Cars in the future. The easiest way to make a car futuristic is just to add a humming sound. So they're electric, I guess. But they didn't look electric. They just looked like normal cars. But when you saw them driving on the road, they had this kind of humming, high-pitched hum sound that they made.
But my car makes that sound.
Does it? Does it though?
Yes. It does. I think you commented on it when I came to visit. Yeah.
Right.
But
Okay.
my electric car. Yeah, it does actually make that sort of noise.
Oh wow!
So
wow, you're living
the
in
future is here now, Dan.
Yeah.
Best special effect.
Without doubt, my favorite special effect in this movie is I think it's called a molecular whip, a laser whip, which I think is achieved purely through rotoscoped light added in post-production. I think it's an optical. It's really cool and fast, and I love how Shinji keeps cutting statues in half diagonally, and later he cuts Udo Kier in half
Yes.
diagonally as well, and he falls to pieces.
It just slides off. Yes.
But it's just the way he sort of whips it around, and you just get this sense of this sort of halo of red light around the room, and then something terrible happens and somebody loses a limb. I don't think it's terribly practical. I don't know how he uses it without cutting his own limbs off.
Well, I mean,
which eventually he does.
He definitely falls on his sword at the end with that one.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah, gets his head sliced off. That was my favorite effect as well because it just looks so tangible. It looks like it's there. It doesn't look rotoscoped. It doesn't look like it's been composited. Yeah, it's really, really well done. And the fact that it's just so destructive as well. You can just whip a door open with it, you know, slice a whole human in half. That's terrifying.
Favorite sound effect.
I always giggle at that quintessential modem beep sound from the 90s. Like and they have it in this movie when Johnny goes into the internet, but it's kind of like mixed low. Maybe they didn't want to make it sound too loud, but it's just so part of 90s internet that sound that it's just it just brings me right back to my childhood.
Yeah, it's iconic. Back in the days when you used to do it down the phone line, didn't you? And if somebody else in the house picked up the phone to dial, it would interrupt your internet connection.
Yeah. Yep.
Honestly, there's a whole generation of kids listening to this that are thinking, what are you talking about, Grandpa?
Yeah. I mean,
true.
And we had, there were kids in my school, they would have two lines. They would have two phone lines, one dedicated to the internet.
Those were the cool kids.
They were the rich ones, yeah. They
were the rich kids that had the dedicated internet line. Yeah.
So favorite sound for you?
My favorite sound was quite a simple one. It's just the synth snap noise that you hear when Johnny plugs that needle into his brain interface.
Oh, yes.
It's just a lovely little wet resonant synth crack that I just thought, oh good, that's really nice. That's sort of technological, but it has a hint of sort of, power that you can really feel like something. He could short fuse himself if he's not careful. I liked it. I thought it was nice.
Yeah.
Most funniest moment.
The funniest scene for me is definitely the reveal that the Deus Ex Machina in this movie is a cybernetic dolphin called Jones.
Yeah.
I just love it. Especially its sass because Johnny calls it a fish.
Yeah.
So it sort of microwaves him for a minute. Love it.
It's ridiculous. I mean, come on.
That's in that set as well, I really did feel like I was in a Terry Gilliam movie for a moment. It just was inches away from Python, really was.
Sure. Funniest scene for me, this is definitely unintentionally funny. So it's a scene with Johnny and Spider, so that's Henry Rollins' character, and they're having this back and forth about like the situation. and it's supposed to be very tense, and it's kind of reminiscent of like Michael Bay movies, or even all those crime scene investigation movies where there's a lot of cuts back and forth between the two characters. It's a lot of dialogue, but every time it cuts, the camera's moving, and I know it's supposed to add a sort of tension, I guess, but it just looked ridiculous. Like all this kind of moving forward, and it would cut to Keanu moving forward. It was almost like a parody of itself. And I thought it was hilarious.
It begins that sequence with a circular camera motion going around the bed as well, I noticed.
Yeah.
It's just like, this is just kineticism for the sake of it to make this dialogue scene interesting.
It seemed more, I guess, tense, but it didn't. It didn't work at all. Well, that's our movies.
It is.
Hi, I'm Jean-Nic.
And I'm Jean-Philippe from La Matos.
And you're listening to Movie Oubliettes.
Okay, it's the moment you've all been waiting for. Final verdicts. Should 1995's Johnny Mnemonic be broadcast out via Dolphin on all your futuristic cathode ray tube TV sets to be adored by all, or should it be sliced and diced by a laser garrote and slid discreetly into the oubliette to be lost in 90s cyberpunk history? Conrad, Johnny Mnemonic. What say you?
Well, I think it's good for me to go first because I think you're more of an unknown quantity. I'm fascinated to see if this holds up compared to your teenage experience of it. For me, I think it's fairly obvious from what I've been saying during the main discussion that this movie did not work for me. I mean, it's the 90s. It's not my favorite decade. I think this obviously pales in comparison to the game changer that was The Matrix that came 4 years afterwards. I think it's obviously directed by an inexperienced director who, despite being an amazing visualist, I've looked at his work, he's an incredible artist.
Right.
He is not a good director, and he is particularly not a good director of a commercial action movie. There are lots of interesting elements. The world building that it's based on is incredible. Some of the ideas in there are really thought-provoking and interesting. I wasn't engaged in the story at all. I don't think Keanu really shone. I don't think this was his finest hour in terms of acting, bless him. I still love the man. But no, I wouldn't inflict this on anybody. I would just sort of like put cones around it and direct people towards the Matrix and say, nothing to see here. This did not work. But I would like to see the Japanese cut to see if it's any better. I'd be intrigued. But no, I don't think this one. I think this one is in the oubliette for a reason. I think it should stay there. But how about you?
Well, I think my opinion about this movie is going to be skewed by three main things. I love Keanu Reeves.
Right.
And I think I will adore anything he's in. I don't know what it is. His acting is horrendous in parts of this movie. I mean, the opening scene is just like, oh my God. Why did they not do another take? Was this the best one? But yeah, he's just something just so endearing about him. Like I just love the guy. He's just so good. And like, I mean, he plays that one character, the John Wick Neo character, really, really well. He's kind of reached an age where it's like, well, I know what I'm good at. I'll just do that. And it works. It just works. The John Wick franchise is some of the best action movies, modern action movies I've ever seen. I really like the world building in this movie as well. I'm not a huge fan of William Gibson. I've only read like half of Neuromancer. I should really finish that. But I do feel like he has a really interesting vision for the future. And there's only like one other movie from his work, a movie called New Rose Hotel in 1998. Haven't seen that. No. I would like to see more adaptations of his written work on screen. And yeah, nostalgia is very, very big for this movie. I don't really remember this movie I remember watching it many times, but I just don't recall any of the plot at all. But yeah, it's just so 90s and awesome for me. I can't. There's like,
no.
I know it's bad. I know it's a bad movie, but there's something so, I don't know, captivating just watching it unfold.
Wow.
It did come across as very 80s as well to me. So like, I mean, you compare it to like Stuart Gordon movies, they're terrible, but they're really great to watch. And for me, Johnny Mnemonic was actually really fun to rewatch as an adult. So I would definitely recommend this movie for sure. Yes.
Oh gosh.
1995 Keanu Reeves, come on.
Okay, well, you know what that means.
Yes.
We're going to have to deploy.
The coin of fate.
All right.
What are you going to go for, Dan? Heads or tails?
Maybe I'll go for tails.
Okay, here we go.
Okay. It's heads. Oh,
yes.
Come on. Reflip.
I think there will be a lot of people listening to this being very relieved at the moment, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a lot of nostalgic 90s love for Johnny Mnemonic.
Yeah. I mean, I will admit it's not a great film. It is really not a great film, but I still love it. I don't know. I can't put my finger on it. Maybe it's that childhood nostalgia.
I think it might be. I think it might be the same experience that you've had with some other films from the 80s that I've thrust in your general direction.
Maybe.
Okay, but unfortunately, in this cybernetic form, he is going back into the oubliette, so come here, you.
Oh, let go of me. I want
Down you go.
I'm heartbroken. No, Johnny, no.
Well, if you thought that we made the wrong decision there after tossing a coin, which is the most scientific method of making a decision, then please do let us know. You can contact us on all social media as Movie Oubliette. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and you can email us at movie.oubliette@gmail.com.
Yes, and if you do want to support us, as little as $1 a month will give you access to extended segments and being able to vote for our future movies that we will discuss. This movie was voted not as a patron's choice, but we did give some options of what we had. So this one did come up on top. But sadly,
It did.
not on top in the verdict. But for $5 a month at Patreon, you get access to our extended interviews with our guests and also the once a month minisode in visual form.
And during Iconicon, you might get access to some behind-the-scenes exclusives too. So
Yes.
look out for that.
Yes. And of course, we have merchandise available on Redbubble as well. You should go to the Retro Blasting site to find the Iconicon t-shirt with us as really cool characters. Like, really cool.
Yes. From 80s films that we've covered, and still nobody's guessed who we are.
Yeah.
We should do a prize. If you can guess who we are, you get one. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. They're pretty obscure. I should have gone as Johnny Mnemonic.
Yeah. Actually, that hairstyle would suit you.
Oh, yeah. So, Conrad, what are we going to be doing next episode?
Well, unbelievably, it will be on the eve of Iconicon, so our very next episode will be a crossover with the Endless Bullets podcast. Matt Swafford, the host of that show, will be joining us to do an action comedy zombie film from 1988 that I have never heard of called Dead Heat.
Whoa, okay. I've never heard of that either.
No, it stars Treat Williams, Joe Piscopo, Darren McGavin, Lindsay Frost, and Vincent Price in a film directed by editor Mark Goldblatt. So,
okay.
I've no idea. Didn't know this thing existed, but Matt tells us we're in for a treat. So,
right.
Can't wait.
Okay. Yeah, looking forward to that.
Yeah. Until then, Bye for now, everyone.
Goodbye.
We review the films others tend to forget. Come with us and open up the movie Oubliette.
Jesus time.